Greetings and salutations. It is I, Johnny, and here we are, 1 week in episode número ocho para este día. Do you speak Spanish? Believe it or not, I do. And how I learned to speak Spanish is actually kind of strange. Um, well, it started, you know, at the beginning of the Spanish. Well, I mean, besides stuff I did in like middle school and high school, um, I was working at a Mexican restaurant in New York City, and probably one of the coolest jobs I had. Although dealing with upper management sometimes was a little challenging, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, it was a cool job because towards the end, I was the hiring and training manager over at this Mexican restaurant in the city. And I trained the wait staff, and I also DJ'd over there. Well, actually, VJ'd because they had video monitors set up, so it was cool. I'd mix, some music, then play, either a music video or a movie clip, and it was a fun job. And then, I was also in charge of creating promotions and stuff. It was really really cool. But the owner was, I don't know, he would deal with people so nastily, and then I would have to deal with the people face to face. Like he'd like curse people out on the phone, slam the phone down, and go, "Hey, go pick up the car," and then I'd have to go deal with people, and it's like I'm apologizing for his behavior, although that's who he is, and it was what it was. But anyway, so the one guy, he came to me and said, "Hey, can you help the bus boys, the kitchen help? They really want to be waiters, but they need to speak English." And so I started to teach them English because that's what they wanted to do. And I didn't really speak Spanish, but I went to this little bodega in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and I bought like 12 or 15 books. Inglés es fácil para todos. And it was one of those things where I learned Spanish by teaching them English. And I think that's my calling, maybe, in addition to other things, but like teaching, because I'm pretty good at breaking down like different things, and then making it understandable for people and just conveying messages. And that's pretty much why I've always risen in any job I've had. That they may be some sort of training person, teacher person. And yeah, that's how I originally started to learn Spanish. Gonna pause for a second because I gotta sneeze, and I don't think that you want to hear me sneeze. One moment. Guess who's back? Back again. And it's like you didn't even know I really left, besides the fact that I paused it for a second. But it could have been minutes, hours, days, who knows. But nonetheless, that's how I first started learning Spanish more intensely. But then when I worked at Apple, and I had just recently been married, and the iPhone launched, and it was bananas, totally nuts down. I worked at the Lincoln Road Apple store when the iPhone launched, and the store was really small store, maybe like I want to say 10 to 15 feet wide, if that, and like, maybe 40 feet long. I don't know. Like, I don't know the dimensions of everything, but it was a really, really small store. I'd probably be giving bigger dimensions than it really was, but it was narrow and long. And when the iPhone launched, people from South America would come to Miami, to South Beach, to get their iPhones, and they literally, we were selling them like crazy. Like they come with garbage bags, and a lot of them were Spanish speaking people. And I didn't really speak Spanish besides like hola, ¿cómo estás? Like just some basic stuff. But the one manager was like, your wife speaks Spanish? Yeah, just help these people. Now, the reality was, my wife did speak Spanish and really didn't speak much English, but I was teaching her English, and I have a very quirky way of communicating with people. Like when I worked at that Mexican restaurant, there was a busboy. Everyone called him Tio. Um, and he was maybe like 60 years old, a really nice guy. Um, and we would joke around, how just sign language and making gestures and just laughing all the time, and we really didn't even speak like I didn't really understand what he was saying in Spanish a lot of times. And I don't think he understood what I was saying in English, but we actually went out one night for beers. And that's the funny thing. And we hung out, and we hung out for a couple of hours. It's strange. So like, yeah, that's when I first met my wife. It was like that, where we would just communicate. And I guess that's my thing. I think because of all that, I think that when aliens do come to this planet, if well, when they reveal themselves, maybe, right? Um, I could be one of those translator people. I think it was it Jodie Foster in that one movie where the aliens came down and she had to go communicate with them. I mean, that could be me. But yeah, so that's when I really started learning Spanish, was because I was forced to help these customers in Spanish. But there was tools on the Apple computer. There was a little widget, and you could use it as the translator. So I would use that a little bit too, um, and I just got better and better and better. And the next thing you know, it was one of those things where here I am, and I'm evolving and speaking better Spanish. And the more I did it, the better I got. Um, Now, granted, before I even met my wife, I was living in Little Havana. I had to move to Little Havana because I was working for the Marlins, and I needed to find a place because I didn't have a car at the time, um, where I could take mass transportation to the stadium because I worked. Well, I worked for the Dolphins and the Marlins, but every time I worked a Dolphins game, the Dolphins lost, so I stopped doing that. But the Marlins were quite the opposite. They were winning and winning and winning, and this was in the year 2003. And if there's any sports fans out there, that was a magical year for the Marlins. They had the lowest payroll in baseball. I think it was like I want to say it was literally like $1.5 million, something crazy like that. Um, and they ended up in the World Series against the Yankees, the team with the highest payroll in baseball. And those were some of the most magical times because straight up the the games, like you think the game was over, and you don't count out those Magic Marlins, and they'd come back and they they would win. And spoiler alert, they won the World Series that year. Um, but that was me just kind of just go with the flow, and I had some really cool opportunities by just working at that stadium. They had me doing quote unquote security detail for batting practice, and that was kind of cool. Like I got to watch, the Yankees and the Marlins batting practice. And to be honest, with you, I'm not really a huge sports kid, but the work ethic that an athlete has to put in to maintain their game and excel at their game, and the focus and the adversity that they face is really, 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 um, it's inspiring, and that's why I started following sports a little more, not just because the Marlins with the lowest payroll beat the highest payroll, and I feel it was like all heart. That it was just, yeah, they had Pudge Rodriguez on the Marlins and Dontrell Willis. I mean, it was just all these guys that just scrappy little guys that just they really had their heart and soul into everything. Kind of like right now, the Miami Heat are without playoff Jimmy Buckets Butler, and they threw down against the Celtics last night. Now, I'm not going to get into sports too much, but I'll say that you can learn something, because like I said, I wasn't really a sports kid, but you can learn something from the way there's that focus and attention to detail when you're working on a big picture goal. And it's kind of like what I was talking about the other day. When you have a goal, it's something to work for, something to make measurable increments and move the needle to get to where you want to be. And I think athletes specifically have that, target that they can say, hey, this is what I'm working towards, and here's how I get there. But the average person, when you're working at a job, depending what the job is, you wake up, you go to work, and you do your job, and you go home. It's not like we're going to go for company of the year. Like, even when I worked at Apple, we didn't have meetings saying, hey, let's work together on being company of the year. It was never really like that. It was more about just the day to day, and there was some big picture stuff, but it wasn't like to really to get on the cover of Fortune 500, even though that's where Apple usually landed. But back to the Spanish stuff. When I lived in Little Havana, it was like I was like the only white boy over there. And at that time, now the Brickell and Brickell City Center and the evolution of Miami, it's become much more mixed and diverse. But back then, literally, people would know who I was just because I was like the only white dude over there, and I had, long hair, and I'm a pretty gregarious guy. That's hey, what's up? How you doing? I like to talk to people. I think people are interesting. I don't think enough people connect and talk with people that are strangers, and I think that's one of my strengths too, is just being able to connect with people. But when I lived down in Little Havana, if I wanted to eat, out in a restaurant in that neighborhood, I had to speak Spanish, because they didn't really understand what I was saying. So it was like, yo quiero un hamburguesa con queso, por favor. I want a hamburger with cheese, please. Y una cerveza, and a beer. And I'd make my little friends over there. Yeah, and that's kind of the I guess, one of my talents would be that just connecting with people, different walks of life. And I find that straight up, like, I was at a trip to New York about a year and a half ago, and in the airport, I was walking. It was early in the morning. I want to say it was like, 6 a.m., something like that, 5:30, something like that. And some dude had a cool shirt on in front of me. And I'm the type of person, I see something, even if the person I don't know, I'll say it, especially if it's a positive vibe thing, generally if it's a positive vibe thing. I generally don't like to throw negative vibes out into the universe. But I made a comment on the dude's shirt, and then we just started, small talking. And it turned into this whole big connection, because the dudes, we're sitting in there waiting for after we got through security, waiting for our plane to take off. And, I'm working on this whole podcast thing. And, believe it or not, even though this is episode 8, I've got a whole series of video podcasts called the My Friends at I Show. And I've got over 16 episodes of that recorded that, in fact, today I'm gonna do a bonus episode of in that airport, me and that guy, I just bust out the microphone and we started doing an audio podcast. And so that's something I will air, because I think if you put positive vibes out to the universe and you talk to, strangers, like, then you never know what can happen. And this guy's been a pretty good influence in my life, because he's, of the same mindset. We understand that life is something that can be shaped, and with the I don't even. I'm just gonna put the podcast up there, let you listen to it, and then you can come back to me and be like, "Oh, that was interesting," because his friend going to the airport said, "You're gonna meet someone in the airport," and this is a whole other episode. Maybe I'll do this tomorrow's episode. Spirituality in something that's a non-traditional religious sense is something is evolving and becoming more mainstream. Like in the town of Warwick, there's like an actual witch store. Well, I won't say witch store, but it's the Lighthouse Curiosity Shop. Um, but the owner, she called herself the Chakra Witch, and a lot of people will think witch is like the Wicked Witch of the West, but there's the Glenda the Good Witch, So I think it's what you make of it, but this whole thing with chakras and you know your your aura, and these are things, and I've actually connected with some of these people, and they tell me stuff that I don't even know how they would even know it unless it was real. I mean, there's no way they did research on me. I mean, I just met these people at these different events and stuff like that, and they mind blowing stuff. So I think that will be tomorrow's episode. And I'm going to leave you with this. Sometimes you got to leave behind everything that's on your mind. You take a step, walk away, and you live your life day by day. But when things are bringing you down, you got to make a smile out of a frown. Don't you worry. Things will be fine. All you got to do is give it time. But sometimes you just got to get away. And so I'm going to get away from this podcast. There'll be a bonus episode of me and Mike Doc McFarlane in the My Friends and I audio podcast teaser episode. And thank you for listening. I know this episode kind of went a little bit all over the place. I've had some interruptions and stuff like that. But, I mean, at the very least, I'm doing this for myself first just to kind of get things out there. But it's also nice to have a little catalog and archive of who Johnny is. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think a lot of people really know who I am. And if you'd like to know anything about me, hey, send me a message on the Instagram at iJohnny. I'm on the Snap too and the TikTok, but I don't really use that stuff as much. I find that Instagram is a more streamlined platform for me. So have a great day, and I'll talk to you sometime between now and later.